Hey, couple notes before we start today's episode. You will note that this episode is entitled Little Women, and that is because we are discussing Little Women. And by we, let's call them the Little Women of the Bookening. They are Danielle McNeely. You may know her as the mom who's the bomb of reading. Dubstep Danny. She's appeared on this show many times. Amanda Menzel. She is Mrs. Jacob Menzel, married to the pastor who's a master of reading. And then you've got your Anna Chasteen, married to the scholar who's a baller of reading. We thought it would be fun to have the women of the Bookening come in and discuss one of women's or girls' literature's classic women's books, which is exactly what they've done. And it's a nice meaty episode of the Bookening. Lots of interesting information, thoughts and opinions, and good humor from the ladies. I think you'll love this episode. I commend it to you. I think they did a fantastic job. With one small exception. Danny. I deputized you, Danny, as the king of the Bookening. I gave you my scepter and said, go and rule the kingdom in my stead. And you had the gall to say some things about Miss Jane Austen's work that, well, I won't even repeat them. But they're noted in posterity. Perhaps, Danielle, you were counting on my infinite kindness to edit out your shame, to save you from etching this embarrassment in the stone that is the everlasting internet. Alas, Danielle, my forbearance is not that deep a well of water. Other than that, which is about 15 seconds of the episode, this is a really fantastic episode. I commend it to you. Listen to it. One more note. You may notice that we're not doing a Narnia book today. We're about midway through our Narnia series, which we had promised to people when our Patreon account, where people can support our work, patreon.com/thebookening, got over $750 a month. We said we'd do Narnia. Now, sadly, Patreon, after it got over that and we started doing Narnia, has dipped back down. It is currently, as I record this, a little bit under $750. And I don't want to, I'm just going to be really honest here, I don't want to have to hold Narnia hostage, but I honestly do have to do it. Warhorn Media is a nonprofit. The money that we raise on things like the Bookening actually does go to supporting my salary, Jake's salary, some of the salaries of the other people who work for us. So, long story short, I love the Bookening. The Bookening is not going anywhere, and the Bookening has to make financial sense. And all of those things are true. What I need for you guys to do, if you're a lurker, I love our lurkers, but if you are a lurker, if you're someone who has some spare cash they could throw towards the Bookening that has never got on the Patreon bandwagon, go to patreon.com/the Bookening. Sign up for as little as $1 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month gets you the donor shout out. You can sign up for the $25 level to get a t-shirt, which we are sending the t-shirt design in this week. It's really cool. It says terrifyingly right. Or another popular level, if you're able, the $50 level. You get a book signed by me, Brandon, and Jake every week, which is a really cool level, and I encourage you to sign up for that. I usually draw people a little picture, and we'll write some witty comments about the book. So if you're someone that is supporting us right now and you're able to support us a little bit more per month, that'd be great. If you're somebody that likes to listen, has never supported us, and you want to jump on, now would be a really good time. We need to get that level over $750. We actually cut things pretty close the last month in terms of being able to make salary. We'd really appreciate any help you could give. If you get us over $750, I will, of course, start releasing the Narnia books again. I would love to get us over 1,000, at which point we've promised to do the Lord of the Rings. So if I can get actually within the next month or two before 2020 over $1,000 per month, then what I'd like to do is start working Tolkien in maybe on a monthly basis is what me and Jake and Brandon have talked about. Like we'll do a little bit of Tolkien every month and make Year 5, Season 5 of the Bookening 2020, the year of Tolkien. So, we can do The Hobbit. We can do, obviously, the 3 Lord of the Ringses. We'd be willing to do the Silmarillion if that's something that people would be interested in. I've never read it, or I've never gotten through it, actually. So if this is not a good time for you to support us, I understand completely. If you could just tell some of your friends about the podcast. Maybe think of one person right now. Think of an episode that you think that person would enjoy and send it to them. Get the word out. This is a labor of love. We love doing it. Bookening's not going anywhere, believe me. But we do need to raise some more support, and we need to do it soon. So go to patreon.com/The Bookening today. And I'm hoping that we can get it over 750 by next week so that I can go ahead and start releasing Narnia episodes again, because I want to talk about Horse and His Boy, Magician's Nephew, and Last Battles. And really, if we can just get comfortably over that 750, maybe even comfortably over the $1,000, that's what would really help us to continue producing this podcast. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your love. We have a bunch of great fans, and I really appreciate the letters and emails, tweets, and Facebook messages and everything that we've gotten over the years. Really gratifying. Jake and Brandon would say the same thing. I know we really love doing this podcast. We love reading these books. We love talking about them for you. And we love it when females that we like do the same thing. So without further ado, let's listen to an episode recorded a month or two ago with three wonderful gals. Take it away, Danny.
Coming up next, The Bookening reads Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Hey everybody, welcome to the first all-female episode of The Bookening. All right, I am Danny McNeely, Dubstep Danny, the mom who is a bomb of reading.
Did you come up with names for all of us?
I did.
Oh, good.
I'm really excited. And I am here with two of my friends, Amanda Menzel, the pastor's wife, who's a master at life.
Master at life.
No, I don't know.
Good.
So, but master is masculine, but calling you the mistress of life is weird.
That doesn't sound very nice.
So we're going to start with master at life. Hi, Amanda.
Hi.
How you doing? Amanda is wearing a sweatshirt.
Yep.
It's striped. Would you call that a sweatshirt? A pullover?
Pullover. It's got a hood, a hoodie, or it doesn't have a sports logo or anything on it.
Mm-hmm. It's just very cute.
Thank you.
Also,
Jake bought it for me.
Oh,
Picked it out himself.
the pastor who's the master of reading.
Yeah. And the hoodie picking outing.
A man of many talents. On my right is the one and only Anna Chastain.
Hi.
Hi. Are you excited to hear your name?
Yep.
Do you have any guesses? Do you have a name for
Let's
yourself?
See, who's Brandon again? He's the...
Brandon's the scholar who's a baller of reading.
Oh, right.
And also, lately, Ghost Brandon.
Ghost
Brandon.
Well,
I thought that was going to go away, but it stuck.
my kids principally know you as an art teacher. Therefore, you are the artist who's the smartest at reading.
Nice.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Nice.
Thanks. Alex
The
kind of rolled
artist
his
is
eyes at that.
smart.
So. Like, I was impressed.
What's mine again?
The pastor's wife is a master at life.
Pastor's wife. Okay.
You're even broader than reading. Everyone else is just
Yeah, just
reading.
life.
You're just life.
And that's good. I'm
So-
not a master at reading.
This episode's an interesting balance of should we be normal bookening? Should we be ourselves?
Mhm.
I think we should have 3 to 4 minutes of banter, just so that nobody's confused about what they're listening to.
And not much giggling.
Minimal giggling. Giggling podcasts are just the worst. We'll go for lots of loud laughing. No giggles.
Chortling.
Chortling. Guffaws.
Yes. I don't know how to guffaw.
So we are shaking it up today with bookening. We're not starting with context, although we do have a contextual Texan
Yep.
present in the room who will give a hail and hearty yeehaw in a few minutes. We're actually going to start with baggage check because we thought you might all like to get to know us a little bit. And then we can all confess how much of the book we actually finished this time around.
Mm-hmm.
Here's an airplane.
How many times have I read the book?
Well, just your baggage check.
Well, the first time I read the book, I had just had Ian, so it was like my nursing book. Nursing and feeding the baby book. And I read it on an iPod. So tiny screen.
Whoa.
Yes. Like in
That's
the...
a lot of scrolling.
Yes. The one with 100 words a page.
Uh-huh.
I read it in the Books app, but I loved it. And thinking about it now, I thought, wow, did I really read that entire thing on that tiny iPod?
That's
but
so impressive.
I think I did because I got to the second part, which I didn't. this time. Here you go. There's my confession. Yeah, I loved it that first go around and got to read a lot of it just sitting around holding a
So that
baby,
was
which
8
is
years
a
ago.
sweet time. Yeah, 8 years ago, August, September, coming up.
Any more baggage about books in general? Maybe about American literature, about old books.
How about the movies?
Oh yeah, the
Mhm.
movies.
I don't have any baggage of the movies. Never
She doesn't
seen the
watch
movies.
movies.
Although, so Little Women is like the title is a little bit off-putting.
Yes.
I'm not a huge reader. Wasn't made to read a lot growing up, like in school. I did read some as a kid and then kind of grew out of it. I'm a slow reader, so that's also a hindrance to reading a lot. But Little Women, more of a classic book.
Mhm.
Didn't read a lot of that. Being an adult, thinking, Little Women, do I really want to read that? But I probably heard you talk about it really fondly,
Probably.
and probably Kate Beddinghouse talk about it, and other people, and was just looking for something to read and clicked it on my iPod.
Was it free? Like a
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you remember that Books app?
Mhm, I do.
That's where I was.
I read books on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, on my
On the
iPad after
bookshelf.
babies.
So yeah, it's a girly book, and yeah, I hadn't read like any classically girly books. If that's a category.
Is it a category? It's a good
Well, I
question.
guess it is.
Like Gone with the Wind. Is that a classically girly book?
Or Pride and Prejudice, which I read after
yeah.
reading Little Women. So this book, Danny gave me this enormous book.
Alex gave you this.
Alex,
Well,
Danny's mister.
Yeah, I guess we did it together.
Yeah.
He orders the books and mails them to everyone, but he asked me what copy
Yeah.
I had.
So that was a little bit of baggage.
That it's a really big book.
Mm-hmm. It's an enormous book, and it is very nice, and it has nice pictures, but it's just such a huge book. And had I known that the book had 600 pages or something back 8 years ago, I may not have read it.
So maybe it's a good thing you read it on your
Yeah.
phone.
Yeah.
Where it says up at the top, they have like
2,000
Right.
pages. I don't think I just thought, oh, this is just such a tiny thing anyway. It's got
Scrolling
it. Every
through.
book is 2,000 pages.
Yeah.
right. So Anna, tell us your baggage. All your baggage about everything.
Well, let's see. I think I first read this book when I was a teenager. I'm trying to remember the age. It's probably like 13 would be a good guess.
Mhm.
And I remember really liking it. I remember being very angry when Jo did not get with Laurie. And I thought, she's crazy. And why would she marry this old guy?
I was still really hoping that this time around.
But then I loved the movie with Winona Ryder, and we watched that all the time. And I think it kind of replaced the book in my mind.
Mhm.
And so over the years, I was kind of just like, wow, Laurie was like a jerk. I mean, it's like this one second he's like just telling Jo that he could never love anybody else. And he's so passionate. And then like the very next scene, he's just like telling Abby that he just wants to be part of her family and he loves her. And I was just like, wow. I mean, why would...
Love was different back then. I mean, even Jo said that
Part
she
of it
wanted
is
to marry
you get a
Meg.
little more time in the book.
Oh, yeah.
that
A
you
lot
don't
more.
have time for in the movie.
Yeah.
But then I thought it was really funny that Alyssa read it recently and she had the same reaction. She was just like, how come she didn't marry Laurie? And how could she marry that old man? You know? Yeah. And I was like, I don't know. As you mature, he's like, he doesn't sound that old to me. It was the better choice.
Yes. That's
Yeah.
so funny.
But yeah.
That's something we can talk about. Would Jo and Laurie have made a good couple?
We'll
What
save
would
that.
that have turned out
Tuck
like?
that question
Yeah.
away. I'll write it on my napkin.
Yep. I started reading it this time around, and I ended up switching over to just listening to it because life is busy. But yeah, I enjoyed it the second time around, and I felt much better about Laurie after reading it because it does
He wasn't
give
so much of a jerk.
Yeah, he wasn't quite as much of a jerk.
I got a better sense for Laurie this time around too.
I think I first read this, I'm pretty sure in first or second grade.
Wow.
And the reason I remember that is because, to give you a little taste of who Danny was as a child, I remember I had this yellow Apple paperbacks copy, big fat, but smallish book. And I was reading it while walking home from school because the school was down the street from our house. So I know it was for second grade because I moved just in school, third grade. And I was walking down the street reading, and it was some poem that I was composing a little song for as I walked down the street to my house, singing to myself.
Was it the one
This
that
poem?
Jo wrote for?
I think so. It might have.
Mr. March?
I think it was actually the one of all four girls with their like chests. Remember that poem?
Yeah.
Right at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't get there today.
Right. Well, actually, I didn't get there either. So that was the first time I read it. And I think I read it again in high school, maybe, or college. And then again, I think after college. And then mostly again just now. I didn't quite get... Well, I kept thinking, hey, we've known about this episode for like a year or something. But I was like, I don't want to read it. I want to make sure I read it close enough that I remember everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I read it too close and I couldn't actually finish it.
Yes.
The irony. But I did. I reread parts that I didn't remember very clearly and skimmed other sections. It's been, I think I'd call this my favorite book. If you'd ask me for a favorite book, I would say this. And I think it's largely because every time I read it, I get something new out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I read it as a little girl and like all the stuff in the beginning was so familiar. I remember that the strongest memory is that Amy had that purple dress with yellow dots or something. And I personally was like, that would have, like, she hated that dress. I was like, I would have hated that dress too. It was just like, actually, maybe it gave me that feeling. Maybe I've always hated that combo because of Amy. I don't know. And then reading it again, I know they're supposed to be
Complementary
colors. Artist who's the smartest, right?
Aren't they opposites on the color wheel?
The yellow and
Yellow or purple and
blue.
orange?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's blue and orange. Or is it blue? Yeah, I don't know.
I have to look at a color wheel.
Yeah.
She's the smartest at reading, folks.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, so I read it, understood a lot. Actually, I wonder what I even thought about part 2 as a kid. Because rereading it now, part 2 really is so much more grown up.
Mm-hmm.
Where part 1 is like a lot of their scrapes and their like shenanigans as kids. And their like
formative years.
Yeah. And then
things.
the second half is death and marriage and babies and like, marrying, like choosing to marry the older, wiser man. Like all this, I don't even know. Like, I don't know what I thought about that as a second grader.
Husband and wife relationships and dynamics and discipline.
Yeah, so each time I read it, I get something new and something helpful. I relate more and more to Marmee. I like want to be more like Marmee every time I read
Especially
a book.
this time, yes.
Yeah.
Especially this time.
Like
I have also said it's my favorite book too, but yes, definitely reading it this time is like, wow. Yeah, I need to be more like Marmee. This is a nice setup for parenting older kids. And then the big episode with Lori and Meg and all of that, and how Mr. Lawrence deals with him and how Joe intercedes for him. Yeah.
Well, and switching from now, my oldest is 8. So like much closer to like Amy's age and remembering like, oh yeah, those trials are really hard. It's nice I don't often read books about girls that age anymore.
Although they feel a lot younger. I don't know if it's just a more innocent time.
Well, and yeah, when Marmee's talking with Joe about like how she has conquered her own struggles, like, this is how I should talk to my children.
And that sweet letter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when you first read it, you told me I'm pointing at Amanda, there were 2 chapters that you think every young married couple should read. And I totally agree. There's when Meg and John first get married, and then
when they're having their difficulties,
when they're having with their kids. And I rereading them now, I was like, wow, this is really helpful.
Yeah. I think while I was reading that, I thought, this needs to be read at like a bridal shower. Totally.
Younger.
Yeah. So I think it was a more innocent time.
Yeah. So a more innocent time, or she just said they were older and wrote them younger. I don't know.
Yeah.
But they felt a lot younger at the end.
I don't know. I guess by the end of it's funny to me that it's only 1 year, that first book. It seems like they do grow up a lot more in that first half than just a year.
Right.
But yeah, that Meg.
Because then there's like a 4-year gap. Is that right?
Yeah, 3 or 4 years.
Between them, you mean? Or between the
2 books.
Okay.
Yeah, the intermediate section. So that is a great segue in some ways to context. Are you ready, Anna?
Da-da-da.
Yes.
We need a hail and hearty yeehaw.
Yeehaw!
Oh, that was really good.
All right, so I kind of have 2 contexts here. I have a outline of her life, and then I actually have a letter from the contextual Texan
himself, from the man himself,
which he was very kind to write, and it kind of just gives us an idea of what was going on in the literary world, and also what transcendentalism is, because it plays, I think, strongly into her philosophy. So I'll start with
go for it.
An outline. All right, so she was born on November 29th.
Who was born? I haven't even said her name.
Louisa May Alcott.
I said it in my intro
did you?
tagline.
Okay.
Mhm. Did you say Louisa?
Yeah, I did.
How would
Is
you
it-
pronounce it?
I guess it's Louisa. Is it Louisa?
That's how I would say it.
I would
Louisa.
say with the Z.
With a Z.
Louisa. Louisa.
I kind of like Louisa. Makes her sound like Louise. Huh?
Well, you may end up getting it both ways. We'll just see what comes out.
I'm excited.
But where's she from?
Anyway, so Louisa May Alcott was born on November 29th, 1832. Her father's name was Branson, and her mother's name was Abigail. She did have 3 sisters, an older sister whose name was Anna, and then 2 younger siblings, Elizabeth and Abby May. Which is kind of interesting that Elizabeth's name stays the same,
Yeah.
and I think they called her May. It's just the same letters, but
It's Amy.
Yeah,
That's funny.
So she's the Joe in the...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So her father was a transcendentalist, and he was also really good friends with Ralph Waldo Emerson and with Henry David Thoreau, who were also part of that movement. And he was a very influential person in reforming education for children.
Who was?
Her father.
Where
Yes.
do you know where they lived?
So she was born in Germantown, Pennsylvania.
Hmm.
I think they spent most of their life in Massachusetts.
Is that where this is set? In Massachusetts? That's
Yeah.
what I've always thought. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
So I think this first little part here happened in Germantown. He was an influential person in reforming education for children. So he believed that education should be tailored to each child through like dialogue between the teacher and the child. And it's more of like a personalized education on
The
for each
teacher
kid.
and the child or the teacher and the parent?
Teacher and the child.
Oh.
Yeah. Let's see.
So less big school classes.
Mm.
Yeah, less
Okay.
lecture, I guess,
Tutoring.
and more
Tutoring, yeah.
dialogue.
Which is why he loves Mr. Brooks so much.
Mhm.
She loves Mr.
Yeah.
Brooks so much.
Yeah.
And he's a good guy, not a mean school mister.
Right. Like that other guy.
He also encouraged like study of nature and exercise to be a part of their education too. So Louisa was mostly educated by her father at home, sometimes governesses. They had a time like every morning where they would study. But also Emerson and Hawthorne and Margaret Fuller all had a part of her education too.
Nice.
And they were all transcendentalists. Yeah, so in 1834, I just want to say Branson, but it's Bronson?
It's Bronson.
Bronson.
Yeah.
Bronson. Yeah. So he moved his family to Boston, and he moved there to start a school, this progressive school that would kind of go along with his beliefs. It was called Temple School, and he actually got Margaret Fuller and Elizabeth Peabody to help teach there. And it was very progressive. At some point, it was found out that not only was he teaching like a personalized education for each child, but also a personalized view of Jesus. So I'm not sure what all that entailed, but I think that was surprising to some people.
So transcendentalism is a
Let's-
worldview.
Yeah.
Yes. And we'll get into that with Brandon's letter here.
Okay. Okay.
Hold your horses.
The school, so I guess he opened that in 1834, and by 1840, it was closed. It happened when he admitted a young black girl, and parents were not so excited about that and started pulling their kids. So that school failed. So then this gets really weird. In 1843, so just like 3 years later, her father started a transcendental utopian commune.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Whoa.
In Harvard. Yeah. That sounds pretty weird.
That was unexpected. I wasn't
Yeah.
ready for that.
So they used
Don't they all go there, though? I mean, people
Right.
who have revolutionists.
That's true.
Revolutionaries.
they used no animal products or labor. They had no artificial light. All property was shared between
Wait,
everybody.
artificial light meaning like candles.
Yeah, like nothing. Like just
Wow.
Oh, there's the sun.
yeah.
In
So Louisa's mother, Abigail, she said there was no animal labor except that of woman. Because the men spent most of their time studying philosophy and did not work.
Oh.
And this was mostly a farm.
I wondered how this
And
worked.
with no
Mhm.
animal labor,
Oh man.
that pretty much left the
Did
women.
Abigail say that bitterly?
I don't know.
And how did she make breakfast in the morning?
I don't know.
There was only the sun.
But it lasted 7 months and then failed.
That's utopia, folks.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So at some point after that, Abigail received an inheritance, and they got some financial help from Emerson, actually. And so they moved near him to Concord, Massachusetts. And I think the home that they had there was called Hillside. Louisa spent a lot of time in Emerson's library. He had a very extensive one. And so this was when she really got to read a lot of really good literature.
How old was she been then?
I'm not sure.
No,
That would have been around 1845. So what? She was born in 32. Somebody do
Okay.
math.
13.
Nice. Yeah. So she was young. They moved around a lot, actually. Her father really didn't provide well for the family at all. Yeah, I think they moved 22 times in 30 years.
Whoa.
Yeah. And I think it seems like they got a lot of help from family, friends, and things like that. The house that's in Little Women, or that it's set in, which is Orchard House? Yeah, Orchard House. They moved there in 1858. And that's the same year that Elizabeth, her sister, died and Anna got married.
So she was 16. Yeah. Wow.
So in 1849, her first book was published, and it was Flower Fables. And actually, she originally wrote it for Emerson's daughter, like 4 years before that. So I think that was her first work. Again, it was a little unclear.
That's your first published work.
First published work, because I got some different websites were saying different things, and I wasn't sure. It was probably publication date that was saying one thing was before the other. But,
Right. Well, and I think they're also, it seemed, at least based on what Joe did, there was like being published in a paper,
Exactly.
Yeah.
being published for free in a paper, being published under a pseudonym in a paper, like versus actually getting a book.
Yeah.
It's all
That's kind of what
different.
I was thinking too.
Mhm.
I was just
think-
trying to look in this book for
When she
a
was
list of her
17,
works,
she wrote The Inheritance, which was, I think she was inspired by one of the Brontes or something.
Okay.
She was probably the youngest when she wrote that, but maybe it got published later.
Okay.
Yeah. After that, she worked in Boston as a governess. She took sewing, and most of this was really just to help her family financially. She felt a strong burden to take care of her family, since her dad really wasn't
Right.
doing so hot at that.
It's interesting to process the book
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
that lens now.
Yep. I guess even more interesting, too. But yeah, so during the Civil War, this was really cool. Her family actually was part of the Underground Railroad. Like,
Oh, cool.
Yeah, this one year they were station masters, and they housed a fugitive slave for a week.
Wow.
Yeah. And during the war, in 62, she was a hospital nurse. She volunteered for that, and she meant to do it for 3 months, but she ended up getting typhoid pneumonia about 6 weeks in and almost died. Something they treated her with there actually contained mercury, and they think that she had mercury poisoning that kind of just weakened her the rest of her life. So she spent a lot of times not being well. Right after that, her time as a nurse kind of inspired her to write hospital sketches, and that was in 63.
Okay.
And it was just kind of about how the hospitals were run. People loved it. It was just,
Interesting.
yeah, very popular. Also, right around that same time, she started writing under a pen name, A.M. Bernard. And this is just really interesting because it kind of follows Joe's storyline a little bit, because these were all very sensational stories, like spies and thrillers and death, I guess, just very exciting stuff. And she made a good amount of money doing it, and she sent most of it home to her family. She said just multiple times, it just seemed like that was the focus. Like, she's just writing because she needs to make money for her family. So she did that. She did that for a while. And she wrote some other things too. She tried to write some serious novels that they weren't as popular as her pulp fiction, I guess. So I guess we'll jump on. Somewhere in here, my thing is very sloppy. Writing it down.
In your composition
I think I missed a place. But she worked as an editor. Oh, here it is. Yeah, she worked as an editor for a while for a children's magazine called Mary's Museum. And I believe it was like an editor that she met there, or maybe helped her publish some of her other things. But he really wanted her to write a book for girls that was not about fairies. And she didn't think she could do that. She's like, I don't know what I would write. Didn't really want to.
Any idea what was out there about fairies at the time?
I mean, well, that's what she wrote. Her first book was about fairies.
Oh, did you say that?
That might have been, fairy fables might have just been in contrast to what she'd previously written.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is kind of interesting how she ended up writing Little Women. Was her father wanted to publish this like philosophy thing, and the publisher said, well, convince your daughter to write a book for girls, then I'll publish your story.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So she did.
And does anybody ever read Bronson Alcott's philosophy book? No. That's funny. It's really interesting that I was wondering as I was reading, the March, Mr. March, Father March, was pretty darn perfect. And it seems like maybe he was like her idealized version of what she hoped her father would be.
And he was often wore a more noble.
Right. So yeah,
thing to lose
they're
into.
poor for noble reasons.
Yeah.
That he
was a chaplain, right?
Yeah. They're stable. Their home is full of love. I wonder if it's, and that's why he doesn't really have any faults, because he's not a real person. Whereas it seems like Marmee and the girls are based off of real people.
Yep.
More so. That's really interesting.
Yep. So Little Women was published in 2 parts. In 1968, she published the first part. And then in 1969, she published Good Wives. And now they're mostly combined into one book.
Except, of course, when they're not.
Yeah.
And you're surprised.
Do you think you have 6 pages left?
Yeah. And I'm missing half the book that I remember.
But yeah, it was very, very popular. Well, this is a little funny, little side note too, but people would come to meet her, and she really didn't like being in the limelight that much. So this one month, I think she had like 100 people come to her door. So she started pretending that she was the maid when she'd answer the door.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Pretend I was the maid of my own house.
Yeah.
It wouldn't work.
I mean,
Be a bad maid.
We've done that. I do that answering telemarketers. We used to back when we had a house phone. Oh, I'm sorry, there's nobody by that name here. Or something like that.
Just the babysitter.
No.
After that, she did make a good amount of money, I think, for the time. And she kind of could never go back to adult fiction so much. I mean, I think that she wanted to, but the stuff really, really sold. And I think there's a quote by her that I have somewhere. She said, 20 years ago, I resolved to make the family independent if I could. At 40, that is done. Debts all paid, even the outlawed ones. And we have enough to be comfortable. It has cost me my health, perhaps, but as I still live, there is more for me to do, I suppose. She paid off all her family's debts and made them comfortable. But people loved her so much for the children's writing that is most of what she did for the rest of her life. And she didn't really talk so much about the pseudonym either. Yeah. And she did write some other things too. She wrote some like essays, and I think she wrote a satire on the time at, did I say that the little commune was called the Fruitlands? That's what it was called. Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah. I think that was...
I'd like to read that satire.
I think it was called Transcendental Oats or something like that. She also was very active in women's rights and in the temperance movement. She was like big on encouraging women to vote, and she was the first person to register to vote in Concord. I think that was in 1879 when they said that women could vote if it had to do with children or education. And so she was the first person to register, and she voted on like the school board, something, you know. Yeah, and she was like the secretary of the Temperance Society or, you know, something like that.
So she never married?
Nope, she never married.
I was waiting for that. I was going to ask it.
I kind of wondered, I was interested to think and compare the book. Like, did she wish that there was, you know, a Professor
Bear?
Yeah.
Did you said her older sister married?
Yes.
Did her younger sister too?
Yes.
Okay.
She actually, her sister May, she died. And she left, like, I think she may have died, like, right after childbirth. And she Louisa kind of adopted her daughter, whose name was Louisa, and she called her Lulu, which is really sweet, because I call my daughter Lulu.
That's really cute.
Yeah. So she adopted her, but she also legally adopted, her older sister Anna's son, because Anna was widowed. Oh. And her son is the one that got, like, all the royalties and rights to her works.
Oh, wow.
Interesting. It's like her nephew.
Yeah.
And that's a lot like Little Men. Have you read Little Men and Joe's Boys?
It's been a really long time.
So Little Men and Joe's Boys, Joe and Professor Bear open, or like they have a couple of their own kids, but they also take in like all these orphan boys.
Yeah.
It's like that's a lot of where her heart was for orphans. And
So Lulu was only 8 when Louisa died. Louisa died in 1888 at the age of 55. And she died 2 days after her father died. Louisa had a stroke, and people looking back think that she actually might have had lupus because of like some signs, like she had a particular kind of rash like on her cheeks and things like that. So they think that she was weakened by the mercury poisoning and then perhaps had lupus and, you know, some other things going on. But she wrote around 300 literary works, which I had no idea.
I've read a couple of it. I've read Rosenbloom and 8 Cousins,
I've read those.
But I have no memory of them. I read them in college. I don't really remember them.
One of the things that she wrote was a collection of short stories, and they were called, it's something for the Lulu in the title. It was really sweet. Gonna have to look for it.
You took copious notes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so impressed.
I kept rewriting it and like putting like more things in and then trying to. I can't think of it.
So, any idea what her mother was like?
No,
Except
there
probably
didn't seem
angry
like there was a
about the
whole
utopia.
lot
Okay.
about her mom. It's gonna really bother me that I can't remember the name of that just because I thought it was really sweet.
Well, it's okay.
Well,
Well-
obviously, she must have had a sweet relationship with her niece though, because
Yeah.
she wrote stories for her and named after her, and
Yeah, that's sweet.
Interesting dynamic. So she took in her nephew.
Mhm.
Mr. March is Aunt March's nephew,
Mm-hmm.
and she was kind of, sort of, the benefactor,
Mm-hmm. Benefactress.
begrudgingly. Benefactress.
Oh, you miss one of my favorite parts in the second part in Good Wives is so Aunt March tells Meg, if you marry that man, I'll never give you anything.
Well, that's the very end of part
Right.
one.
So then she regrets that. And so the
Oh.
little story in Good Wives is that she convinced a friend, like she gave a friend money to buy all of her linens, to buy all of Meg's like new sheets and
Oh,
things
nice.
to give
Yeah.
to her
Yeah.
and don't say it's ever from Aunt March, but they all found out.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, it's pretty funny.
I didn't remember
Lulu's
that.
library. All right, you guys ready for
Some transcendentalism.
the letter from the contextual Texan?
Ooh, okay.
All right.
Is it written to us or
Yes,
to
kind
Bookening
of.
readers?
Dear
Or at
listeners.
least-
It says, "Dear ladies of the Bookening."
Okay.
Ooh. Sorry, gentlemen. You gotta turn off your podcast thing. Your turn off your ears.
Dear ladies of the Bookening, I was going to say Little Women, but let's be honest, you guys are beyond that.
Oh.
First, from Anna, I expect a hail and hearty yee-haw.
Nicely
Very
done.
nice,
You
very
did a
nice.
good job.
Danny and Amanda, I trust you won't let her read any further until her yee-haw shakes a sound, proofing off those walls.
Uh-oh.
You
might
can
have
trust
some work
all you
to-
want, Brandon. We're not breaking anything.
Second, Anna, mon amour. I love it when you read context to me.
Oh, that's beautiful.
A preamble. I'd never read Little Women until this week. I'm not the one giving a review, so I'll keep to myself whether it filled a void in my literary knowledge. Professor Regina Barreca, who wrote the introduction to the volume I just finished, suggests I can't understand American feminism without digesting this book. I have my doubts. I also have my doubts whether Regina Barreca understands American feminism, or whether the 1800s American feminism is a thing worth understanding, or just a category Barreca and her friends made up to discuss it, like when my grandfather convinced me to hunt snipe. My impression of the book, it's what Charles Lamb would have done with a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, softening the edges, removing all unlikable characters, made the sisters' faults charming, but Anna only needs literary context from me. Oh my goodness, I can't read this. But
Amanda can read it to you.
yeah. But Anna only needs literary context from me, so I'll leave it there. She's providing the bio, which I'm expecting will be the definitive Alcott biography. Any luck, we can live off the proceeds. So, literary context. As Anna has pointed out, Louisa May Alcott was foremost a businesswoman. She lived for years under the oppressive roof of a father who wouldn't work, who thought philosophy more important than providing for his family. He was a failed poet, a failed social reformer, a failed educator. Some of his motives were honorable. His schoolhouse closed because he admitted black students. But in the end, he was a skimple, which to our listeners who've read Bleak House is not a compliment.
No, it's not.
He was a man who thought his poetry and ideas more valuable than they were. Few others agreed with him, and so he had to live off the kindness of friends and the not-so-kindness of his creditors. Alcott seemed to respect her father, while also seeing him for who he was. It is telling that the father played such a small role in Little Women, not able to provide a sense of authority or direction, leaving his women to learn self-reliance. Alcott would have learned the same principle from her father and friends while discussing transcendentalism. Her father would have made this principle a necessity due to his failure to provide for and protect his daughters, and inspired Louisa to create a type familiar in literature. Think of Mr. Bennet or Antonia's father, the intellectual patriarch, too taken up by the idea of his greatness to do anything of value. Understanding her father's failures makes it clear why Alcott became a populist writer. The shame Jo feels when when Bayer discovers her sensational publications, would have been a familiar source of shame for Alcott. She began her career wanting to be a great writer, but had to provide for her family. And when she tried to create more mature works like Moods, critics were not impressed. It wasn't until she, like Joe, listened to her publishers and cut the fluff she thought would make her great, and landed on the formula that made her rich. Her publishers wanted a work that would sell, like the best-selling Hans Brinker or Silver Skates or Alice in Wonderland, which were both first published in 1865. With the improvements brought on by industrialization and technology, children's literature, like all literature, witnessed a change in the mid-1800s. There was a sudden surplus of cheap populist publications, literary journals, and magazines that would pay $100 or less for a story. These publications provided a platform for many developing authors. Think Dickens as a contemporary of Alcott's, or Fenimore Cooper, whose stories of American adventures predated her own by about 20 years. Then there were more respectable venues like The Atlantic that would also pay for poetry or stories. Alcott took advantage of both avenues. This growing literary economy inaugurated a golden age of children's literature, and the introduction of authors such as Lewis Carroll and Alcott. We still remember them today. It is worth noting that this was just a decade before Tom Sawyer, the high point of boys' literature in America, as Little Women is the high point of girls. As publication and printing capabilities continue to improve, and the power of the dollar children for their parents. Oh, I see. Yeah. And the power of the dollar children or their parents might spend on novels suited for them. So the content of those novels changed to fit demand. What used to be primarily didactic and educational shifted to entertainment, to appeals to the imagination. At the same time, realism, as opposed to Victorian sentimentality, was on the rise, with Tolstoy and George Eliot, and shifting the literary landscape. Since Alcott, like Joe, felt the necessity of providing for her family, she put her literary aspirations aside and did what sold in the new environment. This social reality, more than anything else, explains Little Women. Does it have feminist aspects? Yes. Does it have liberal, progressive aspects? Yes. If you think about what at the time would have looked progressive, but the actions of the protagonists of Little Women are tame compared to the radical ideas proposed only half a century earlier by Mary Wollstonecraft, a true proto-feminist, whose ideas led to the free love lifestyle of her daughter Mary Shelley and the Romantic poets. Alcott does share in the heritage of the independent woman author, but by the mid-1850s, we'd already seen Austen and the Brontes, and then there was George Eliot, who would have been mid-career when Little Women was published, and a mere few years from publishing her masterpiece Middlemarch. And since all these novels deal with the feminine perspective in a complicated way, the claim that there was anything truly radical in Alcott's writing a novel from the perspective of a woman is suspect, to say the least. And if one argues the Revolution is her writing about young girls, this doesn't give her much, and forgets Jane Eyre, not to mention Mansfield Park. Finally, though feminism had philosophical precedence in France at this time, feminism would not become part of the American political lexicon until the early 1900s, and the suffrage movements. So whatever aspects of feminism might be in the book, they are not intentional or thought of as feminist in the sense that they would be half a century later. It is true a sort of feminism was tied to the philosophical environment Alcott experienced through her father and friends. For one, progressive attitudes towards equality of property ownership and working and voting rights were already a staple of the American intelligentsia. Alcott was a contemporary with both Florence Nightingale and Sojourner Truth. But Alcott would also have known these ideas personally through her father's involvement with the Transcendentalism movement and his friends Emerson and Thoreau, who were both foundational Transcendentalist thinkers. So what was Transcendentalism?
Great question. I've been wondering
Yes.
this.
Do tell.
A foundational American philosophy. It began in the Harvard Divinity School in the 1830s with the Unitarians, combining British skepticism with doses of German biblical interpretation, which was bad, and a serious misunderstanding of Kant's idealism. So like most American products, it was a foreign hybrid. It asserted that the individual and nature is essentially good, corrupted by social institutions, and the importance of self-reliance and independence of thought in bringing the individual to valuable moral principles and insight. The buzzwords of American individualism and independence largely come from it.
It
Interesting.
makes sense.
Well, yeah, that was all over this book.
Yeah, it was.
Alcott's father's friends, who were also her childhood tutors, would have inevitably infected her with this philosophy. Emerson and Thoreau would have taught her self-reliance, and Thoreau perhaps help romanticize the lazy independence of her father through his own lifestyle of living off the good graces of Emerson, building a shack near his pond. Margaret Fuller, a women's rights activist and transcendental intellectual, would have taught her progressive ways of understanding politics and gender. Her father would have offered a picture of what it meant to live as a transcendentalist, glorifying ideas over work, valuing ways of living that could be good, like admitting black children to school, or foolish, like living as a vegan on a failed communist farm, which Alcott satired in Transcendental Wild Oats. Whatever the case, it is doubtless this philosophy would have affected Alcott, in dealing with its aftermath, been a predominant theme of her life. Whether or not it also affected her writing, that's for you guys to decide. Warmly, Brandon.
This is the first all-female plus Brandon episode.
Yeah.
No kidding. Thanks for all those talking points, Brandon.
Yeah, thanks. One of the things that I wrote on my Wendy's napkin with my Sharpie was feminist?
Question mark?
Because it is, there are obviously lots of elements of independence.
Oh,
and so, here, what do you guys think? Was Louisa May Alcott a feminist?
I don't know. It's really weird that she wrote the book that she did.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it has all these scenes in it, like when she's in New York or wherever she is. Wait, is it New York
I think
in the
it's
book?
New York.
I can't remember. I'm maybe mixing it up with a movie.
I
I'm pretty
know.
sure it's New York. Amanda didn't read that
I
part.
don't know. 8 years ago.
But like there's this scene where she is sitting in this boarding house and there's all these men that are just like talking about like philosophy, the new philosophies, and she's finding herself being like carried away by their talk. And then Professor Bayer comes and he sees that she's kind of like being carried away, and he's like steps in it. And even though he's very quiet, he argues with them.
Right.
Did you
Yeah,
read that
I
part?
read that part.
Yeah. I mean, so you see like scenes like that where it's just like, I mean, what she's saying then, you know, obviously that Joe needed a man to come in and talk
Yeah.
some sense into her.
She needed an older,
that's
wiser
true.
man.
Yeah.
Well, the whole book is so domestic.
Mm-hmm.
Like she clearly loved the home. And even there's one point, one of the early chapters, which talks about how each of the girls, their unique gifts beautified the home in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So she has a broad view of what a woman can be, which I think is good, because obviously the 4 girls are very different, and that they can actually, but they each have domestic skills. Even, wild Colt Joe
Mhm.
is a really good nurse.
Yeah.
Things like that, which I think that one is herself. Joe is obviously Louisa May Alcott.
Yeah.
And has the most sympathy in that. So I think she's writing herself. But there's just a love for the home. And there's
Even a love for their father, the
Mhm.
authority in the home. And he was obviously the head of the home. It was a really sweet moment when Marmee was about to go away and they were considering that he might not make it. And it was as if the whole day darkened, as if all happiness was going to be breathed out of their life.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Like the very life breath of who they were, who their home was about to be extinguished. When you don't have that. And if she was a feminist,
Mhm.
at least there was still some foundational father figure, authority, male, female balance happening.
There's a great part too after Beth dies, when Alcott talks about how Joe was softened by that, and she loves Meg's babies. She sees Meg and John and how happy they are, and she thinks, like maybe I do want to get married. And Meg's like, yeah, you want to get married. But Meg does it really carefully,
Yeah.
and that's
Well,
It's a-
Joe does that for her, actually, in the first part. They're dreaming about their castles in the sky.
oh yeah.
And Meg has this really romantic, dreamy thing about being surrounded by the people she loves and just like, you mean children, right?
Yeah.
And Meg is like, well, okay, I said the people I love.
Yeah, and maybe she was a feminist in her day, but I can't think of any modern feminist reading this
Yeah.
and being on board with any of it.
Yeah, no.
I don't understand how they can read it and think, just that,
Well, I mean, it could have been like one tiny peg,
Right.
climbing up the feminist ladder, as it were. But it was a really tiny one. At least to us.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, maybe a feminist can pull out that tiny peg, but man, like there were so many things in here where I was like, well, I need to do better at that in my home,
Yeah.
and I need to do better at that in my home, and that's a really good point. And
Even, I mean, just the positivity and lack of
Mhm.
any cynicism, like zero, zilch ounce of cynicism, all
Mhm.
self-awareness, all, my faults and things that I can improve, and piety
Yeah.
and all of it.
And there's, so much about individualism. That's clearly a prized
Yeah.
thing. Even, the American girls are individualists, and you get
Mhm.
that in part 2 when they're abroad, but also so much about self-sacrifice
Mm-hmm.
and self-service, and how you actually will find fulfillment in your life by giving to others.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know quite how she reconciled those two things, being an extreme individualist and serving others. But yeah,
I think part of it being transcendentalist is thinking that a sacrifice is or self-denial is like sweet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think you're right.
Well, if you think about them going to have this utopian society,
Mhm.
I mean, that's all largely others focused. So there was still some of that. at
Unless,
play.
of course, you're the man
Yeah.
discussing philosophy
Yeah.
and making the women
Yes,
work.
you're right. Yes. Well, we're talking about Little Women, I guess. I meant to, I think it's in where I first read it, maybe Carolyn Mahaney's Feminine Appeal.
Mhm.
I think in the introduction or something, where there's a journal entry, probably from the time period that the book is set in, from a young girl, and then compared to maybe a hypothetical journal entry of a modern girl. And it was very much in line with how these girls were talking in Little Women. I need to improve on
Yeah.
all these faults of mine, so on and so forth. And then the modern girl was, my friend's this, or my parents this, and I'm so unfortunate, or I want these things. Just the stark contrast of, like I said, self-awareness or thinking of others. Your place is not just you, but your place in the family, in the home, in the community.
Well, you get some of that from them in the beginning, especially from Amy.
Yeah.
Who then is taught and trained well by a good, by an authority figure. So that's probably
Who we don't really like.
Oh, the teacher. No, I was thinking Marmee.
Oh, I was thinking about later. So it's not in the beginning, but Aunt March.
Oh yeah. Oh, Aunt March. Who Alcott still kind of loves. There's still affection there. You can tell. I don't know who Aunt March is after, but there's some affection there. Even when she tucks her cane under her arm and dances at Meg's wedding, because Mr. Lawrence asked her to dance. So there's still some affection there. All right, context. Solid.
Yep.
Good work.
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Chastines. Thanks, Texans.
Yeah.
All right, we can talk about Joe and Lori. We have options. We can talk about Joe and Lori. We can talk about, I'm curious if there's any, I have a theory that I would like to be confirmed or denied about who you identify with as you read the book.
I was wondering that too.
Yep.
And those are all the questions that I remember right now that I've written down on my napkin. So Anna, who do you identify with as you read the book?
I feel like it's a hard question because you want to identify with Joe somehow, but I don't think I'm Joe at all.
Yeah.
I couldn't decide if I was really more like Meg or Amy. And I really didn't want to be like Amy because I felt like she was just the least mature and the most vain and all of this.
She's the youngest. It's true.
But
she is the artist. And that is your one defining feature on the show. You're welcome.
The artist who's the smartest.
The artist who's the smartest.
So, I don't know. I decided I ended up being something of a combo between Meg and Amy, but
Meg and Amy.
Joe's still my favorite.
Yeah. Amanda?
I think more as a child, I was Beth.
That's really interesting because I was going to say I didn't think anybody would really be Beth. I thought she was too perfect.
Except Amanda.
But I think I have an inner Joe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm
Just maybe in the quietness.
I think maybe I swing from Joe to Beth.
Maybe we're all really too. We should probably personality type.
Yeah.
Are you?
Is there? I bet there's a quiz
Meg?
out there.
Yeah, Meg, Joe, Beth, or Amy, or probably all
BuzzFeed
hybrid.
quiz.
You're kind of a Joe with a sub Meg.
Yeah. I definitely have some self-loathing that Joe has.
Yeah, I'm a lot a Joe. As younger, I was 100% a Joe. Like Joe sitting in the attic, eating apples, reading books, crying.
Talking to your pet
This
rat.
is me.
Yeah.
Like this is I. But now I think I'm much more of a Meg. Can I be
It seems hard to define Meg.
Well,
in my mind, at least.
I think she actually changes the most because she goes from really like upper edge of girlhood to like children, which I guess they all get children in the end, but you get the most of her like motherhood life,
her arc, because she seems so young when it starts,
right? And she is. But I think about so how old are they when the book ends? I don't remember. How many years does it cover?
It's something like what the first part is a year.
Yeah.
And there's I think there's a 4-year gap in the middle, and then I think Amy is in Europe for like 3 years.
Yeah,
something like that.
Because that's why there's a lot of time for Amy and Laurie to fall in love.
Time.
It's like 2 or 3 years, and yeah, because Demi and Daisy, because they get married. Demi and Daisy are born. They're like toddlers, or anyway. So when I think about like Meg is I think 16 at the start. Meg's 16.
She's 17. Joe is 16.
Okay. Alex and I started dating when we were 16. And to think about who I am now, like, yeah, I've changed a lot. It's kind of hard to define who I am.
Yeah.
And so I think Meg really starts to come into like actual womanhood.
And I think some of Meg's struggles are interesting, like the whole part where she goes to the party and she wants to be accepted, and then she lets them dress her up, and she plays the part, and
she reflects on that later.
Yeah. She's like, she's immodest, but
Oh yeah, and Laurie is appalled at her.
Yeah,
right. That's what
I feel like. That's real stuff that has happened.
Yes,
yes,
yeah, I can totally relate to that.
Yeah, that felt
Middle
very
school,
real.
High school.
So my theory was that you tend to relate to Jo just because I think she's maybe better written than anybody else.
Yeah.
Because she's Alcott.
And you're doing a lot of seeing through her too.
Right. And I think too that a lot of, if you're a young girl who picks up this book, you're probably
a reader. Yes.
You're probably a reader who sits in the attic eating apples and reading books and talking to your rat named Scrabble.
Yeah, wishing they had a pet rat.
So I think that's part of it, is that like I was Jo as a kid.
I mean, I read all the time, constantly.
Yep. There was a summer. I did summer swim team. I was not a total couch potato. There was a summer where we actually had to switch the couch cushions because I would just plant myself on one end of the couch and just read all summer long. I'd like go to swim practice in the morning and then come home and just read. And so partway through the summer we switched the cushions.
That's great.
I'm sure I did chores. I remember being outside, but mostly just read. And that's why I thought I could tackle 300 pages this afternoon.
Wow.
But I now have 5 children. Also, I was like trying to plow through it and thinking, this is not a book that is like designed to be plowed through.
Some parts are confusing, actually.
Well, in each chapter, it's totally not a cliffhanger book at all.
Yeah.
Each chapter ends like a story.
Yes.
And in the second half too, especially when they get more scattered. It's like, here we are with Amy in Europe, and now we're going to go back to Meg. Like everything ends very... Yeah,
it's like a sitcom.
Exactly.
It's
a 19th century sitcom.
You have your little story episodes, and then you're done.
It's true.
Little Women sitcom. That's why it's the miniseries and the whatever.
Yeah.
Who did that?
I wish I could have watched some of the movies.
Who did that?
I think
what is it on?
It's a PBS miniseries.
PBS.
And I bet it's good.
I'm going to see it.
I actually started it on PBS like last summer. I think it came out last summer. I started it, and then I went back to watch more of it the next week. All of a sudden, PBS only offered it to like subscribers or something. So I literally saw about 10 minutes of it.
Tisk tisk.
It was
PBS.
great. Though. It was 10 minutes. So good. And then I think the reason we actually did this episode is because there was a new movie version last year. Like a modern one.
Or is there a new one coming out this year too?
Is there anyone?
I'm pretty sure.
Oh, there's that Sir Ronan. Well, however you say her name. I don't know how to say her name. It's Irish. I apologize to all our Irish listeners. All of them. I should ask my Irish neighbors, but they're not here. Sir Ronan. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
It's spelled like Sayorse.
Sai.
But you know that those names are always pronounced weird.
You're like, sure.
Yeah, I don't know. It's probably like I can't even hazard a guess.
I don't know.
Stacy.
Well, I didn't know it was coming out. I think I mentioned to Brandon that there was a modern one last year, and he's like, "Well, there's one coming out this year." I think that's why.
That one I think is
so
like set It's like just the book, though.
Okay.
This one that came out
Oh.
last year was like a modern retelling. And the preview looked legitimately very good. The cover of the movie looked ridiculous. It looked like super cheap B-movie.
I was
awful.
really surprised when you said the trailer looked really good.
I remember the trailer being good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I ever watched the trailer actually, but yeah,
But you didn't watch
I just
it?
couldn't imagine that it
Well,
would be good.
I didn't watch it partly because we were out of town all weekend. It was actually due back on Monday, and I just got it returned today, and I still didn't watch it. So
it
I owe
didn't
money to the library.
show in town. It only had select theaters.
Right. It was a pretty small opening anyway,
Yeah.
but
Do you know anybody who was in it? You remember?
nope.
Is it my job to Google this?
Yes. The problem, that is your job. You are of Jake.
The pastor, pastor's wife who is a master of Googling?
Googling. I think the biggest problem with any movie or TV adaptation is that Joe's always too pretty. Like always.
Mhm.
Because in the book, like her one beauty is her hair.
Yep.
And they say
Yeah.
that all the time.
Yeah.
But you just can't do that.
Did anybody have trouble picturing Amy's nose?
Oh, right.
No matter what, I couldn't imagine it.
I actually have. Well, it's
Big or
funny.
anything?
I had a neighbor growing
Oh,
up who's
weird.
blonde with a wider nose, like not a very slim Grecian nose, and so I kind of pictured her.
Joe isn't especially pretty in this one.
No, she's not. That's one thing I liked about it actually. In the preview, that one is that the one you're looking at? The new one?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm looking at the 2018 one.
Yes, that's what I.
So Leah
that's what I-
Thompson, she's Marmee. Leah
I know
Thompson
who that
is. Oh, drat. I'm terrible at this. Yeah. She's somebody. Is she in Back to the Future? That's her, right?
I don't recognize her at all.
Really?
I'm going to pronounce that name that I didn't know how to pronounce before. It's pronounced Saoirse.
Oh, yes.
Saoirse Ronan.
Oh, I
She
love
was
that name, actually.
Ladybird.
Yes, she is. That woman looks like she's been in a movie I've seen. Right?
She's got to. I'm pretty sure she's Back to the Future.
She is Back to the Future.
I should have looked this up on IMDb. IMDb. It's the
You're
first
right.
thing, Back to the Future.
You're so good.
Nice.
Her name is actually Catherine. No, Leah Catherine.
You are a master at Googling.
She's the youngest of 5 children. We don't need to know this.
Anyway, yeah, that one I maybe would have watched. But I didn't have time to. Also, wasn't sure my husband would watch any adaptations of Little
Yeah.
Women. And I could, so my plan was actually to watch it while he was in China, but I hadn't finished the book by then, and I didn't want anything to replace my memories of the book. And really, I just did this all in the wrong order, like totally wrong order. I should have just watched it while he was gone. Apologies. We'll just have to have a Bookening episode.
Yep.
Well, we'll watch 4 versions of the movie. Sorry, giggling. Okay. Oh, I had a question. Bear with me,
Wait a
Nathan.
second.
I had a question.
Oh, okay. So you pull up Little Women 2019 and pictures from like all of the movies come up. Like the very first pictures from the 1994 version.
I don't think
with-
it's coming out this year. The
Oh.
Saoirse Ronan one.
Well,
I think it's next
if you
year.
go down to the cast, Emma Watson is in it.
Oh, yeah. Is she Joe?
No.
Oh, she's Meg.
Yes. Emma Watson is Meg March. Timothy Chalamet. Or Chalamet. Whatever. Is Laurie. Saoirse.
Saoirse.
Saoirse Ronan is Joe March. She was not very pretty in Lady Bird, so...
You're right. Yeah,
We'll
she is.
see what
She's a
happens.
much plainer look.
Ooh, Meryl Streep, Aunt March.
Sounds fierce.
Yeah. Florence.
Can Emma Watson do an American accent?
I don't know. Because she... Surely.
You say surely.
Surely.
Surely she can.
Florence Pugh, or
Pew. I would say pew.
Pugh, is Amy March. Laura Dern, who was What's-Her-Face on
Yes.
Purple Hair Lady in Star Wars,
Yes. Unfortunate.
is
she Marmee?
Mary March. Who's Mary March?
Marmee. Is that Marmee's real name?
Maybe. Oh, it
yes,
must be.
because I think she's Margaret.
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
because they named Daisy after Meg and her
Okay.
grandmother. Her mom.
Eliza Scanlon is Beth March. Don't know who that is.
I recognize the name. You can,
Bob Odenkirk.
I had a question,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't remember what it was.
Sorry.
Well, while you're thinking, what did you guys think of Beth? Always have a hard time connecting with Beth because she really just seems so perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It does make sense though with the transcendentalism because they think that you're supposed to like kind of be worthy, I guess,
Mhm.
to be in heaven. And
Yeah, well, I did think of, like, I've known people who have had children die young. Yes, so a family that we know who had a child die young who said, we always thought she's just a little too good for this world.
Mm.
And we wondered what would happen as she got older. She seems so innocent and so good. What's going to happen to this child? And then God took her young. there really are situations like that, like Beth, where you would really worry about Beth as she got older, just what would actually happen to her gentle nature and her service for others. How much would she get taken advantage of? All these things, but instead she dies young, and it's just a godly influence on everyone around her. But that being said, there's some not great theology in this.
As I was reading Beth today, I actually thought of a young woman that we know that reminded me of her, or Beth, or the other way. Just very quiet, but a lot of people like her. And that's one thing that Amy says. I want to be really liked. If I'm going to, be at the end of my days, I want people to love me as everyone has proven to love Beth, which is kind of strange because of Beth's shyness to a fault.
Yeah.
In many cases. I don't know. What were you said you couldn't relate to Beth. Was there another part of your wonderings about that? About her?
No. She just overall just always seemed so perfect.
The thing I've just been eating the chocolate chips and the cranberries for the record. Everything else is a little just sticks in your teeth, a little too crunchy.
I don't want to go back to the movie, but the thing I was going to say about the movie was that Lady Bird was coming of age movie. And it's probably the way this is. The way her take with Little Women. But,
this, I'm probably falsely remembering this from an article, so take that for what it's worth, which is not very much. But I'm pretty sure.
So much bouncing.
I think Timothée Chalamet might have played a homosexual or a transgender or something in another movie. And so this director's like, hey, look, Joe's played this girl who's kind of feels like a boy, and he's a boy who's really sensitive, and we really don't. I was like, I don't think I want to watch that movie. Based on that article. There's a really great summary from me.
Okay, if you would probably you're supposed to say that you like Joe the best, probably. Who did you like the least?
I never click with Amy.
Yeah. Yep.
I understand, there were little moments reading it this time that I really got better, but it's just not quite it.
I don't remember anything about her part 2 self.
She matures a lot. Well, I think, so she starts as 12, 13, 16. So she's like 17 or 18. Okay, so she goes over to Europe. She ends up being with Aunt March, and they have another aunt, I think is probably Marmie's relation, who decides to take Amy with them to Europe.
And Joe loses her opportunity by...
because Joe's...
blabbering.
Right, because Joe's like, Aunt March is bossy and I don't like her, and so she's all bratty. And Aunt Carol's like, not taking you to Europe. Yeah. Taking your sweet little sister who charms everyone. But it's a good growing time for Joe. Yeah, they go to Europe. Laurie goes over there after he's devastated by Joe. And Amy rebukes him for being lazy and makes him man up. And then they're separated again. And he comes back when Beth dies.
They correspond in between.
Yes, they write letters to each other. And then he comes and comforts her when Beth dies because she's still in Europe. Yeah, so Amy seems...
Is he a musician?
He tries for a little bit. They both discover, because she goes to do art and he's doing music, and they both discover that talent is not genius.
But which is interesting though, because I've had that feeling before too. Yeah. Just kind of never gonna be a genius, but that's okay.
That's a lot of what women were made to be. You were talking about women can be different things and have different talents or, avenues of interest and still be a woman, be domestic, whatever, be feminine, but you're not the artist, you're not the musician, you're not the
generalist
writer. Right. Yeah.
Wide interests, nothing really deep. That's how I justify, I've made one quilt in my life.
Yeah.
I don't need to be a quilter.
Yeah. And even
it wasn't even a very complicated quilt.
Yeah. You can have those interests, but even those things are I don't have to be that one thing. I don't even have to be all the things.
You just dabble, and that's okay.
But I would say that they both realize that pretty quickly, whereas I think most people don't. A lot of people don't.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Alcott's pretty nice to them.
Yeah.
To let them not. Well, maybe that's a little I don't know, commentary on some of the people she knew growing up among idealists, and hey guys, maybe you should have quit early. Quit while you're ahead.
Just provide for your family.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it ends. So I remember reading once that after Little Women ended, So everyone, all the readers were like, Joe and Lori, this is so obvious. You need to get married. And Alcott knew. She's like, this is a bad idea. And so that's part how she wrote that into part 2. So what do you think? Was she right? Were they a bad fit? Were they like Flint and, what is that? Iron and Flint? Is that what Marmee says?
I don't know.
Maybe I got that from somewhere else, from some other great classic.
I have fresh in my mind where Joe suggests Lori and Meg when Joe is so down on Brooke for Meg. So appalled. Yeah, Lori and Meg should get together, blah, blah, blah. And Marmee says, no. He's way too young and immature, and they're the bad fit, for sure.
Well, then Joe thinks that Beth is in love with Lori. And
don't have any memory of that either.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that too.
Because Beth like cries when she sees Lori walking by, and something about her heart hurting or something like that. And so she thinks that Beth loves him. Really, I think she's just mourning the fact that she's not ever going to live a normal life.
Oh, yeah.
She sees how alive he is and is realizing that she's dying. And then Lori's so affectionate to her, and Joe decides he's in love with her too. When in fact he's in love with Joe the whole time.
Right.
And she doesn't want to admit that.
Joe's blind.
She is blind. I believe that Joe and Lori are a bad fit. And I actually like Lori and Amy together, but I don't their story isn't quite convincing how it goes down. I don't know if it just needed more time or if the Joe-Lori needed less time. Like that maybe Alcott should have reined that back in a little bit so I'd believe Amy and Lori a little more. I don't know. Because Amy gets then her finery and but a life of generosity. Not a Sally Moffat life. And so she gets to be still part of the family and wealthy, but generous. And
I was glad that Lori, there was that one line where he tells Joe he thinks if he hadn't been so, over eager, that this would have happened naturally, that he would have fallen for Amy eventually.
Oh, yeah, I didn't read that far.
If he hadn't have been so
insistent on and so obsessed with
about
Joe. Yeah.
Huh. I just don't believe the whole time in part 1 their friendship was that it was just totally friendship. I mean,
well, it wasn't on his part.
Yeah, it wasn't on his part. And it probably was just willful blindness on Joe's part. I mean, she doesn't want Meg to be in love either. But...
Well, and you get that, especially at the beginnings of part 2. I think it's mostly in part 2, where he'll look at her and she cuts him off. Like she really knows it's happening.
She has her sharp pillow or whatever.
Right, yeah, her big sprinkly pillow. She knows it's happening, but also wishes that it isn't, basically.
It's probably like the self-protection, self-reliance that's drilled in, showing up there.
Yeah. And then, then Professor Bear is great. As a kid, it was weird, old bearded German man. This is strange.
He comes around at the right time, though. Joe would not have been ready for him.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, she had a lot of affection for him even before that. And Lori thinks that she must be in love with him. It's like, what's that professor?
At the end, he says something when he comes to woo her, kind of, because I didn't realize, but I'd forgotten that he was there for so long. He comes in and he just spends weeks,
He's pretty awkward, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't know really what he's doing.
I don't remember that, but I want to read it.
But he comes to her house.
No wonder he's so old and still single.
But he says something to her, if I had said something then when we were together, whatever city they were in.
New York. We're saying New York.
Yeah, New York.
We're holding it down.
Yeah. Would you have said yes? And she said, I don't know. I don't know if I would have been ready for that yet.
Well, that happens in that chapter after Beth dies. That's actually, I think, one of the best chapters in terms of morality. Because so often, as I read it, it's everyone promises to be good. Because I love Beth so much and she died, I'm going to be like her.
Yeah.
And it's the chapter right after. That's what I was just reading in the car outside the studio. As I pulled up a little bit early, eating my Frosty. It says it was easy to promise self-abnegation. Great. Never said that word out loud before. Abnegation. Yep.
Abnegation?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't think
it was easy to promise self-abnegation when self was wrapped up in another, and heart and soul were purified by a sweet example. But when the helpful voice was silent, the daily lesson over, the beloved presence gone, and nothing remained but loneliness and grief, then Jo found her promise very hard to keep. I think that's one of the most, one of the least moralizing Because, I mean, that's obviously in this time period when, Brandon said that in his letter, there was like lots of moral novels, lots of moral stories, and that this book wasn't that. And some parts of it can feel like, we're all just doing better. We're all getting better. And this is like reality. It's really easy to promise that. And it's really hard to do it when it actually happens.
I do feel like there was a lot of moralizing, though.
There is. But I think maybe in part 2 it does get better.
Do you think does it move faster? Does it feel that way?
Part 2 covers a lot more time.
Yeah.
It covers several years. And that's part of it.
Obviously,
and they're
there's
growing up.
3 years while she's in Europe, and it's definitely hopping around a little bit more.
But it was in this chapter toward that it says that she was just, that her heart was different. And that now she realizes what it would be like. That maybe it would be good to have a husband and all those joys that she thought she wouldn't want. Realizing how sweet they could be. So it was the Beth dying that really changed her and softened her. I wonder how that actually, because you said Alcott's sister died when she was a lot younger, right?
Yeah, trying to remember where
just
that
in her
was.
Early teens.
It's the year they moved, I think, to Orchard House, unless I have that wrong, which I might. But I think 1858 is it.
Okay. We're going to have some diligent Bookening listener who's going to say, not true.
Does anything go into the second part with the Pilgrim's Progress?
No, it doesn't
thread?
continue. And that's actually something that I hadn't read as a kid.
Pilgrim's Progress?
Yeah, that I read later, and now rereading it's like, whoa!
Yeah, I didn't make any of those connections.
So much Pilgrim's Progress.
Much. Yeah.
Joe meets her Apollyon.
Yes.
Meg goes to Vanity Fair. Yeah. Listeners, if you haven't read Pilgrim's Progress, you should read it with Little Women.
Yeah.
You can even read the kids' version.
A note about the bad theology, where Christian gets to the Celestial City, and Beth is talking about the golden arms reaching out to him, and whether the door is locked to anyone or whether there are guards outside the Celestial City, the actual heaven. And Beth says, no, I don't think the door is locked. I think they're just, reaching out, and anybody who basically is good then can be welcomed in.
Yeah, that's the worst thing, is all the... If you're just good enough. I remember that conversation that Marmee has with Joe about learning to control her temper really is good. It's a great conversation. But there's this, that yes, you need to control yourself. You also need to pray. You need God.
Yeah.
You need the friend. Capital F, friend.
There was a lot of those sweet things. The friend, or I think father was used.
Yeah,
obvious. But the thing about Amy and like her prayer closet or whatever it was with the Catholic maid at Aunt March's house, that too is, yes, it's nice to have a quiet place to pray, and especially in times of trouble, but we're not just going to have a spiritual moment to try to will ourselves to be better or to change and be better. Awareness and knowledge of self and depravity in this book, but also the, I guess, works righteousness, you could say.
Yeah, definitely works righteousness.
Being a good, I tried to be good, and I thought all those thoughts, and it's an interesting balance in the shift that was happening in culture for Alcott, obviously.
Well, yeah, and you said transcendentals, so we're all naturally good.
And nature.
It seems, but it seems like in this that they really have, like, they all have their ingrained faults that are definitely part of their nature. They don't seem learned, or I don't know how the transcendentals would have talked about it, but so I don't know how that's.
I didn't look too much into what all they believed, so
maybe she was a doubter.
Picture, Brandon. Yeah. So whether or not, well, it could have been that she was a doubter, or that you just can't help but talk about people like that because that's how it actually is.
I think that she did have conflict with her father growing up because she was the wild.
Really makes you wonder about her mother.
Yeah.
Well, I think I read that it caused conflict between him and his wife, too.
Okay.
So I don't know. There wasn't a lot of detail, but just kind of like a offhanded comment.
Yeah. There was no animal labor on the farm except for the women. The women working. I had a thought from something you said.
Do.
Oh, well, that chapter. Oh, here's my question that it's been on the tip of my tongue the whole time. It finally came out. Should everyone read Little Women?
Yeah.
/ should men read Little Women?
I have a similar question.
Well, you're not the host, so. You are not.
Okay, maybe it can be a second question. Okay.
Yeah. Well, what's your question? I'll get to decide which one goes first.
At what age should women read this book?
Let's start with the first question then.
Yeah.
I'll say it again. should everyone read Little Women / should men read Little Women? Go.
You go, Anna.
Well, Brandon skimmed this in 2 days and said, I'm not sure it's my cup of tea, but then he was skimming it in 2 days.
Right.
So,
600 pages in 2 days.
yeah.
Ooh.
That's about what I did.
But I don't
Plus
know.
making dinner.
I hadn't really thought about that. I thought about girls and women, but I hadn't actually thought about.
I don't know.
men.
Like, what would you want your boys to read it? Would you be okay with them reading it? I guess those are two different questions. Like, are there?
I have to think.
I don't know.
I don't think it's essential by any means.
Yeah, maybe. What if you have?
Because I don't really think it teaches much
Okay.
to boys. I mean,
even insight for women, I don't think it's especially.
What about fathers with daughters? I was reading this now. I felt much more kinship with Marmee and raising my own daughter. Is there
I don't
insight
know.
there for fathers with daughters?
I would just say read Pride and Prejudice or read more Jane Austen. I don't know. I think I got impatient with the book. And so I think that's a negative in terms of, yes, you should read this because of daughters, because it's a long book.
Yeah.
So I would just rather you read Jane Austen.
I can't imagine boys being very interested with the parasols and the bonnets and the ribbon
And the-
trimmings.
Yeah.
The gloves and the boots. And
Right. I do think I might have Alex read those 2 chapters about Meg and John.
Yes.
About
Those
the
two
Brooks.
chapters,
Those are
yeah,
so good.
absolutely.
Well, I don't know if you remember with the second one, it's a lot about like father's discipline being
Yes.
so essential. And, she says to him, I don't want you to break his spirit. And he says, I don't want you to indulge him to death.
I think
Like-
I remember reading that and
He told-
thought, wow, this was written so long ago.
I know.
We need
And
to
it's
hear
so
this now.
good.
And he tells her to leave, and she does, but she's like, just so nervous. And
And then she comes back and he's fallen asleep after little Demi felt like curl up around him, and she realizes he's not a monster. Like, he's the man I love and married. And there's just so much real parenthood marriage stuff. Well, yeah. And Marmee, well, man, there's self-care wrapped up in there. Hashtag self-care buzzword.
go out to the opera.
Yeah. Marmee's like, you gotta have a life. Like, you can't live in the nursery.
I remember part of that.
You have a husband. You have a husband. You need to look pretty for him. Like,
yeah.
you need to do. I'm going to send Hannah over to be the nurse so that you can go have dinner with your husband. Man, so much wisdom.
Yep.
She had that bad moment with Girls Don't Need Spankings, perhaps,
I
back
don't
in part
remember that.
1. Yep.
Oh, with the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which I don't
But we
believe.
forgive
I
her
don't
that.
think they believed in corporal discipline at all.
Probably not. Yeah, there's an interesting historical fact for all our listeners. It is not a new thing in history to not spank your children.
Mm-hmm.
J.C. Ryle lived around this time, actually, I think a very similar time period. And he has this great sermon called The Duties of Parents. And in it, he says, lots of people nowadays don't want to spank their children. We have this idea that like everyone pre-20th century, everyone like mid-20th century,
It was like the 50s when they stopped spanking
were like
kids, right? The
crazy strict disciplinarians. No, really not. Everyone for all of time has wanted to indulge and emotionally manipulate their children. We're just
J.C. Ryle died in 1900.
boom.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep. But transcendentalism, everybody is generally good.
Right. So you won't need to spank your children.
Mhm.
Actually, when you talk about Bronson,
And she had a
Alcott, I kept
bad
thinking of
father.
Charlotte Mason.
Me too, actually.
A lot of similar
Yes,
ideas.
exactly.
I actually, that's what I was Googling during that. I am not the master at Googling, but I do it occasionally. I looked at Bronson, Alcott,
not
and
a
Charlotte
very-
Mason. Didn't see any links, but they were in different sides of the pond. Very large Atlantic pond. So yeah, I think I'll pull out those 2 chapters for Alex to read.
Mhm.
Jubilee. So when should girls read this?
I think I might have had Jake read those, or at least those monologues.
Sections, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When should girls read this? I read it in like 1st or 2nd grade. Jubilee is going into 3rd grade. She, I think, started it last year and just didn't find it very interesting. But I think it is, like, most kids want to read about kids a little bit older than them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I'm not sure I'd first time give it to maybe a 14-year-old. I think maybe you want to do it a little young.
She might be over it by then. Has Alyssa read it?
She read that 2 years ago, I think. When
And she's 15 now? 16?
She's 15 now.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's probably around the same age, actually, that I read it, around 12, 13.
Okay. That might be a good age. Because then you can kind of relate to Amy, but you also
Yeah.
have Meg being
Yeah.
kind of mature and growing up, and that's
Mhm.
interesting.
Yeah, I was thinking Lucy might be a little bit too young. She might have already read an abridged version. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But soon, probably.
Well, so it's interesting that you mentioned Pride and Prejudice. You mentioned it too. This may be sacrilege to say on the Bookening, but I like Pride and Prejudice. Alex also likes it. He's actually maybe read more Austen than I have because of the Bookening. He gets so sick of how godless they are.
Yeah.
And just how really worldly, moral, yes, but worldly in a lot of ways. And this definitely has more morality,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
even more sometimes sermonizing,
Yeah.
but in a very real way. Like,
yeah. Like the friend thing.
Yeah.
As God is your friend, your helper.
mhm,
Those lines, just here it comes into real life.
mhm.
There it is.
And like,
and it's
yeah,
a breath of fresh air.
the little lectures that Marmee gives are totally real. And she's
Mhm.
tender with them. And that's not anything you'd ever find in Jane Austen.
Yeah.
But there's still humor in this. There's still, it's still lightness. And so if Pride and Prejudice is too dang worldly for you, try Little Women. I don't know if we're allowed to give the Bookening seal of approval, the BSOA, but why not? Would you guys give the BSOA to Little Women?
Yes.
What are the qualifications?
I think it's just if
If we like
Do you
it?
like it? Would
it's
you
a seal of
recommend it?
approval. Would you recommend it to others?
Yes. BSOA.
Yes. BSOA on Little Women. Get the stamp. Is that it? We just need to do donor
Any other
shout outs.
thoughts?
Any other thoughts? Musings?
Questions?
Wonderings?
Hmm.
This is just a thought. I really like little things like Amy being terrible at vocabulary. And just little things like that.
Yeah.
Trying to use
that
words
pop
that
up.
don't make any sense.
Right.
It's funny.
It's just, Beth can be really fastidious when she chooses. Amy meant to say fascinating, but since the girl she was talking to didn't know either word, it was fine.
Yeah.
And she corrects her word choice in her letter to Marmee.
Uh-huh.
I even questioned. I was like, it said corroborated. I haven't corroborated with the girls. And I thought, I don't think that's the right word. That's not the right word. And then the next breath, she changes it.
Yeah. Man, it's crazy too to think about Jo handwriting all of her manuscript.
Oh, that part where it gets burned.
It burns
Oh,
them.
yes.
Woo! I understood that.
What's your favorite moment?
favorite moment in the book?
Oh, man.
You can pick one for each part.
Yeah.
Because they're 2 books.
I can only pick one from the first part. Although the best part of the book is like we've said, the monologues in the second part. The marriage and the mothering one.
Yeah. I remember actually when Alex and I got married, I was like, you have to warn me when you come home with someone.
Oh, my goodness.
Because we're not going to have a Meg and John moment with the jelly on the floor.
Oh, that felt so
Uh-huh.
that felt so intense. And
Oh, man. And her little servant girl, like, sitting there eating bread and milk, like,
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with this.
I think that was actually a piece of advice given in our premarital counseling.
was to always tell them when you're bringing someone
Mhm.
home. Yeah.
It was, I think, followed. It's nice to tell your wife when you're coming home,
Uh-huh.
especially when you're bringing someone with you.
I love Marmee helping Jo with her temper.
Mm-hmm.
I think Meg going to Vanity Fair has some great images in it for me of the
Mhm.
ball and the.
I don't connect well with Meg, so that doesn't really stick with me.
Well, I think she actually reminds me a little more of my sister, who's my older sister. Maybe that's part of it.
Hmm.
I don't know. I
Thought
relate.
about
Well,
it
I
like that.
related to her. I don't know, like wanting to put on the show of actually having fun and not wanting Lori to ruin it. And
Mhm.
yeah, but she also confessed to her mom and her sister a lot quicker than
Yeah,
I ever
that was sweet too.
had to learn
Yeah,
from that.
I really liked the letter from Marmee to Jo.
Mm-hmm.
I've been noticing you're doing well with your temper.
Mm-hmm.
This is really sweet. I loved getting little notes from my mom, handwritten notes. I mean, we would just get like lunchbox notes
Mhm.
on the napkin, but just that extra care has always been really special to me. So
do you leave note?
not as much as I would like. Even from that fondness, I don't do it as much, but
That's what I want to do more of.
yeah. And I that's more of my personality where I have seen those kinds of changes in my children, and I'm not as likely to say those things out loud in person,
Mm.
but even more so writing it down would mean more, and
Mhm.
it's more my style. So that's a nice thing.
Yeah, it's a sweet thing to remember. Do you have a favorite part?
I have a really hard time narrowing it down.
Mhm.
I think my runner-up would be Jo going to bat for Lori with Mr. Lawrence, and she just did it in a very sweet way.
after the Meg
Mhm.
letter. Yeah.
She didn't barge in saying, you should blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
I just want to return a book.
Yeah.
And
And
it
also
was-
doing it scared.
yes, yeah, she was very scared, and it was very, I don't want to do this kind of thing. I don't want to tell you to blab it, but please understand. And then finally he came around to her plan, I guess, and wrote Lori a note.
Yeah. There's a lot of love for the written word in general
Yeah.
in this book, which makes sense. I also love the whole, week of idleness,
Yes.
week of doing whatever we
Yes.
want. And
Oh, yes.
just
a
learning.
Clever mom
Experiment.
moment.
yeah, good mom experiment. I thought,
I wonder
I
what
wonder if that
Marmy
would
did
really
that whole
happen,
week.
though. I mean, 'cause she was still kind of like cleaning a little bit, wasn't she?
Marmy?
well, during the week,
Yeah.
but then at the end, like that last day, they
She
didn't do
leaves.
anything.
Yeah.
She or Hannah. And I think I was like, would that work with my kids? A little too young. A little too young. Maybe.
Would my kids eat? Maybe. No.
Well, we have, readily prepared foods and
Yes.
snacks and bags
It's a little
they
different.
can survive on.
My
They
kids
don't have to
could
make their own
make
bread.
scrambled eggs until they ran out. Although Peter and Lucy could ride to the store
There you
and
go.
get some. There you go.
You-
Ride their bikes.
Though I, as an adult, understand that feeling. Like there are certain
Yes.
days when you just feel like you haven't done anything and you're just like, whoa, what a waste of the day this was, you
Mhm.
know?
Sometimes it happens when I look down at my phone at lunchtime and realize it's on like 30%. I'm like, man, I have wasted my day away.
Mhm.
Look at that. Used up all my battery.
Yeah, Marmy has some good advice there. Make sure there's some work and pleasure.
Yes,
Mhm.
I actually have that quote saved.
It's a really good one. And a balance of both or something.
Mhm.
But you'll read it.
I will read it. Have regular hours for work and play. Make each day both useful and pleasant, and prove that you understand the worth of time by employing it well.
Mhm. Yeah, useful and pleasant.
Yeah, make each day both useful and pleasant.
That's great advice.
Yeah, I love that. Hashtag be like Marmy.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yep.
That's really...
It was amazing
good
to me that
hashtag.
where Joe was asking Marmy, she's like, so when you just kind of like press your lips together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I like that that shows up later
Yes.
when Aunt March says something
Yes.
to her mom or
She's-
something.
yes.
She just
Mm.
pulls them up tightly, and I think I need to do a little bit more of that.
Yeah. If only
Uh,
that's how I managed. mine
Yeah,
for
that's what I was thinking.
Uh-huh.
I was like, I wish my children did,
Yeah.
could ask me that.
Yikes.
All right, are we ready for some donor shout outs?
Yep.
How about I will say it, and you guys will just alternate.
All
Shouting
right.
them out.
Sounds good.
Shout 'em out.
I'm shouting them
Okay.
out. Okay.
What would be the Little Women thing to do?
Say it like Americans.
Hmm.
Just Americans.
Okay.
I actually had trouble sometimes imagining them with American accents.
Yes.
I kept thinking they were British,
Yes.
which is funny.
I did have to remind myself. Where are we again?
Yeah.
Who are the British people in this book?
Yes. Okay, yeah, the British people do not get high praise in this book.
No.
All right. Anna, Robert and Rhonda, the Lovebirds,
Robert and Rhonda, the lovebirds.
the artful Anthony Dodger.
The artful Anthony who?
Dodger.
Dodger.
Mhm.
I don't think I've heard this one before. I'm behind on my bookening listening.
We'll shout
The
him out.
artful Anthony Dodger.
The immortal Chelsea E.
The immortal Chelsea E.
Jimmy Beam and little Annie Oakley.
Jimmy Beam and little Annie Oakley.
Lily of the Valley.
Lily of the Valley.
Andrew and Esther, the Lovebirds.
Andrew and Esther the Lovebirds. And a couple of babies.
Couple little chicks.
Mm-hmm.
The inscrutable Jenny Z.
The inscrutable Jenny Z.
The Keith Master.
The Keith Master.
David's Mighty Men Trucking.
David's Mighty Men Trucking.
We should have an infomercial for that.
Yeah. For all your transportation needs.
There you go.
Exactly. John and Jill and little baby Max.
John and Jill, little baby Max, and baby girl.
And baby girl.
Still bacon.
Oh, this is a new... I need to find this. This is Jay and Katie, but Jay has requested
I just saw that today. Oh, C.S. Lewis and
Uh-huh.
Till We Have Faces.
Yes, but I need to find... Okay, are you ready? This is a long one.
Oh, dear.
Jay and Katie, who are cold and love cheese, and C.S. Lewis, including Till We Have Faces.
Jay and Katie, who are cold and love cheese, and who love C.S. Lewis, including Till We Have Faces.
Very
I
good.
think our internet friend also
You're
loves
welcome,
Till We
Jay.
Have Faces.
My beloved... Nathan's beloved...
Nathan's beloved Mother Beth.
Thank you. Consul Prime Blue.
Consul Prime Blue.
Oh, new ones.
Adam, the Smasher of Worlds.
Adam, the Smasher of Worlds.
They got a little crazy there.
Yeah.
Galactic Princess Emily.
Galactic Princess Emily.
Wow, guys.
Are you ready? Fletcher, the woe-bedraggled wizard of yore.
Fletcher, the woe-bedraggled wizard of yore.
Very good. That was very good. Jeremy, the dark-hooded lord of death.
Jeremy, the dark-hooded Lord of Death.
This is like a different era of donor shout-outs.
Yeah. These have been more recent ones.
Yeah.
Nathan, not Nathan.
Nathan, not Nathan.
The Incandescent Meredith.
The Incandescent Meredith.
All together. Maya!
That was a little dissonant.
That was beautiful. I loved it. All right, Amanda. Ryan the Red Avenger and Judith of the Ladies of Justice.
Judith.
Yeah, Ryan the Red Avenger.
Ryan the Red Avenger and Judith the Lady of Justice.
Judith of the Ladies of Justice.
Let's
try that again.
Ryan the Red Avenger and Judith the Lady of
the Ladies of Justice. Start over. Try again.
Ryan the Red Avenger and Judith of the Ladies of Justice.
Very good. Very good. Danny the Dude.
Danny the Dude.
Ooh.
DJ Sammy G. Take your time.
DJ Sammy G.
Benny and Dana Tiberius.
Benny and Dana I can't say that.
Yes, you can. I believe in you.
Benny and Dana Tiberius.
Very good. Eric and Catherine the Lovebirds.
Eric and Catherine the Lovebirds and little baby Silas.
Professor and Lady X.
Professor and Lady X.
We want to welcome Dylan. We want to apologize that we are a bunch of females welcoming him and not the other people.
Why do we have to apologize for being females?
That is what Nathan said. So Nathan told me to do.
We are not Little Women.
We are big women. I can't believe we haven't said that yet.
What'd you say?
I can't believe we haven't said that yet.
That we're not Little Women?
That we're big women.
Big women is very becoming.
Just cut it all out, Nathan. Cut it out.
Well,
Dylan.
Dylan the Wallflower.
Is that a thing?
Well, Jacob Dylan is the lead singer of the Wallflowers, and he's Bob Dylan's son.
This is spelled Dillon.
Oh.
Should we attach Dylan with a flower?
I'm not sure Dylan will appreciate that.
There's an apartment complex called the Dylan in town.
That's so weird.
It is weird. I don't know why.
I don't know why it's called that either.
Is this a first name?
Well, it just says Dylan. Dillon.
How do these nicknames get assigned anyway?
Nathan just comes up with them.
And then forgets and comes up with a different
And
one.
comes up with new ones if they're not good enough. No, these he has them written down now. Dylan. I mean, we could do something with Bob. Could we just name him Robert Dylan?
Dylan, not Robert. Dylan, not
Bob.
Was his name actually Robert?
I keep trying to rhyme his
Probably.
name. Just
His Bob Dylan's
Dylan Billion.
Dylan Fillin.
Dylan's real last name is Zimmerman.
Bob Dylan's real last name.
I think.
Ralph Lauren's real last name is Leibowitz, I think.
Text Nathan and tell him to come up with a name
That's
for
what I was
Dylan.
thinking.
on the screen. To text Nathan or to sing Lavender's Blue Dilly Dilly? Which one were you thinking?
Lavender's blue, Dylan.
Oh, I love that. Lavender's Blue Dylan.
There you go. Lavender's blue, Dylan.
That's what you get when you get a bunch of females. Lucky you, Dylan. Dylan. The Bookening was performed today by Anna Chastain, Danny McNeely, and Amanda Menzel in alphabetical order. It was produced by Nathan Alberson. It was executive produced, like all fine Warhorn podcasts, by Nathan Alberson and Jacob Menzel. Thanks for listening, folks.
Bye.
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 See you later.